Right. Before we move on to that album, what were some of your best memories of hanging around the Stretch and Bobbito show?
Oh, the show? Oh man, just you just didn't know who was coming up there. I remember Wu Tang coming up. I remember, man, there was so many different people that came through there. The freestyles. I remember we used to answer the phone. Me and Lord Seer, we'd answer the request line or whatever. And it was just dope because it was literally like you weren't getting paid anything, but just being there and seeing what they created, and then watching the documentary late years later. It's crazy just that I was a part of that and was able to sit in that place and watch some of this stuff over the summers. It was amazing. And the access, it was Columbia University. I remember we had to get buzzed in, we had to sneak through this door and all these different things. It was crazy, man. It was nuts. And it was like midnight. It started at like midnight. And I remember like my aunt, like, you going out right now? And I'm like, yeah, the show starts. And I did it every week. And I came home at 5 in the morning. It was all good. But it was amazing to witness and be a part of,
Right.
for sure.
So you guys get signed. What's the conversations like between you and Stretch and Bobbito? Do they give you advice going into this album? What's going on in the earlier stages of Lost in Brooklyn?
We spent a lot of time in Stretch and Bobbito were roommates actually. So we spent a lot of time at their crib, a lot of time with Reef, and a lot of time listening to music, listening to samples, trying to find the right songs. Stretch's record collection was crazy. We had a crazy record collection at our place, and Bobbito was just building his. He was just becoming a DJ actually, and building his record collection. And we spent a lot of time just listening to jazz and blues and rock. I mean, we listened to all country. Like we would spend hours just listening to music, just trying to find the right samples and the right sound. So it was just a lot of that, and then once we were signed, really trying to hone in on what's going to be that hit record, what's going to be that that first single, and what does that sound like, kind of thing.
Right.
So
How many tracks did you guys have done going into that album? I know you had a demo with
uh,
X amount of tracks. How many tracks were you guys already prepared for?
I want to say we probably did 30, 40 songs, at least 40 that we, over between demo and completion, and it had to be 40 because I remember we recorded at Firehouse Studios for 3 or 4 months. We probably did 10 or 12 joints there, and they ended up scrapping those, and then really. And I remember Reef saying, "You guys can't do it all by yourself." And I think that's when Reef brought in the Beat Nuts and or Stretch and Reef were like, it was a lot of pressure to try to come up with 12, 14 dope joints yourself. You think your demo joint can be right on the album and go out, but it don't work that way. And that's when they brought in the Beat Nuts and T Ray, and then we started spending time with them. And that was a huge learning curve. That was really understanding the process of working with producers. But we thought we could do everything ourselves. Between Sean, Jeremy, and myself, we thought we could produce it, you name it, all that. But I think when it was all said and done, we probably did produce half of the album, I think, or less, if I can remember correctly.
Right. What was that creative process like between you and the other guys as far as coming up with the concepts and ideas?
Um, I mean, most of the songs are based off of things that we, witnessed or part of. Um, I would say the process would start in our lab, in our studio in Brooklyn, in my basement, in my house. And then, finding the sample, Sean putting the beat together. Then I would say, take this out, put this here. And then it was just natural because we had been doing it for so long already. And then once we found something or a sample that we loved, we called Jeremy and Soda, we called Soda, and then we like, yo, and they would start writing. And then I would try to think, what do I need to cut and scratch something here or whatever, what's going to fit. And then we would go to the studio, and then we would, hash it out. And that process, the music making process is dope because you start with a sample. Back then you started with a sample and a beat, and just uploading all that stuff into the mixing board, and then laying down the tracks, and then you get to the point that you got, all these. You got the horns, you got the bass, you got the beat, you got the hi hat, the snares. Everything's on a different track, and just seeing it all work together and blend. And then when you finally finish the song, you turn the speakers up and like, all right, let's play it. It's ready. That process is something that a lot of people don't get to witness and don't get to see what it really feels like. But that process is amazing.
Right. You had some of the top producers at the time, Beatnuts, T. Ray. What was that beat selection process like?
Uh, we would go to their studio or their house, or they come out of the studio and just honestly they would just play us stuff. Sometimes it was a sample, sometimes it was a whole track that they already had together, and we would just listen to stuff, and then something would just pop out, and you're like, oh shit, that right there, I think we can do something. And you just kind of we all sit together and just come up with the concept for it. And how does that conceptually come together? How do we mold this into a concept of something that happened, you know, or something that happened in our life or something that was going on in our lives at the time. But it was dope just sitting there listening to beats. Like with the beat nuts, you gotta remember it was three of them. They were all different. You had Vic, VIC, you had Juju, you had Les. They all had their own equipment, their own setups, and their styles were different. So going to Juju's house was way different than going to Vic's house and hearing music. But it was a dope process. And then sometimes they would work together, and sometimes we worked with them separately, depending on what the song was, which was a dope thing. T. Ray was just like sick. He just had beats after beat and would just play it for you. And then he was like, this one, he's like, if you want it, you better get it now because such and such is thinking about using this. You know what I mean? He was like that. He was so hot back then. Everybody wanted his music, man. But it was a dope process.
Do you
For
remember
sure.
some of the beats that you guys passed on and later hearing them on other albums?
I don't remember hearing anything specifically. I wish I could say that I heard something that we passed on it, but I can't remember anything specifically hearing and being like, oh shit,
Right.
we should have got that.
You guys dropped Southern Comfort as your first single. What do you remember most about the reaction when that hit the streets?
I'm trying to think. When we put it out, it's weird because it's for me, I had two different homes. I had Virginia, I had my Richmond home, my people in Richmond in the South, and then I had my people in New York. And overall, I mean, the response was great. We got a lot of love, but I just remember like hearing it on the radio for the first time or doing a show after the music's out. Those feelings were amazing because you worked on something for 2 years. I think our album didn't come out until 92, 94, I think. I can't remember. But we worked on it for a while. And finally to hear it on the radio, to be at a radio station doing an interview, seeing your family love it, your boys from college, it was interesting, especially me being in a small black, historically black college in Virginia. I finished my sophomore year, but I didn't even really finish my sophomore year. After we got signed in January, I cruised through that semester. But everybody knew what I was doing, and everybody had my back. I had some of my boys drive me up to New York, that kind of thing. I didn't even have a car, so there was just a lot of love and a lot of people that had our back and were rooting for us. So it was a good feeling. And
We
we proved our parents wrong because that was a big thing. They didn't want us to leave college. All of our parents, we had to have a meeting with our parents because they were all like, "Y'all are leaving school to do music, hip hop." That was a thing. So to prove them, like, all right, you hear that on the radio? That's what we did all that hard work to do. So that was a good feeling for
right.
sure.
What do you remember most about that video shoot?
Um, trying to think. Oh man, I remember we shot it. I think in Prospect Park in Brooklyn. So it was crazy to shoot a Southern Comfort video in Brooklyn in a park that I used to walk through all the time. Um, it was surreal actually because you watch back then we watched so many videos on Video Music Box and all these different um, MTV and all those things. So just to be shooting your own video was great. But it was cool. It was just something new for me. I'd never done it. I've been to video shoots, but never really been in that process. How long it takes, and what you have to do to get a full video. But I don't remember all the pieces. I remember different scenes. I haven't even looked at the video in a long time, but I do remember that feeling of like, wow, we're shooting our own music video. This is crazy, you know.
Talked a little bit about the creative process. What do you remember most about those studio sessions?
Uh, huh, I'm trying to think. There's so many different parts of it. I remember switching from Firehouse to Soundtrack Studios. Now I remember Biggie working like two doors down, and Lil Junior Mafia and all those. I know those dudes all my life, but I just remember the studio. I would say the most pivotal point was when we started smoking weed, and which was interesting because I smoked back in the day, but at a certain point I stopped. None of us really smoked, but there was one day I think we started smoking with Biggie or somebody, and it changed the process for us. And I could hear the music differently. I could see it differently. I mean, sometimes I can see the notes, almost floating in the air. I can see the bass line versus just hearing it. And that's something that's psycho, I don't even know what the word is for it, but what was activated when we started smoking, like it changed everything from a musical standpoint. We spent more time in the studio, but we really, really heard our music and we could feel